You're listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Ballo from the Jersey Guys Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. My co-host and I, Tom Coyne, have a special guest today, and that's Ben Jackson from the band Crimson Glory. This was a great conversation. Ben was an original guitar player in the band. He actually started the group with drummer Dana Burnell. So we talk a little bit about the band's early days, how they formed. We talk about the band's 4 albums. And we also go into Ben's solo career, and we also touch on the time that Crimson Glory spent with Todd LaTorre as their singer just before he joined Queensrcyhe. So we cover a lot of stuff in this interview. It was a really good one, so we hope you guys are going to enjoy it. So let's get right to it. Hey everybody, this is Mark from the Jersey Guys Podcast. I'm here, as always, with my co-host Tom Coyne, and we're bringing you a brand new episode today. Today we have special guest Ben Jackson from Crimson Glory. Hey Ben, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Excellent.
I'm doing great.
Good. Tom, I know Tom, this is a real good one. Tom was really happy about getting to talk to you and talking about Crimson Glory, so this is going to be a real good one for us.
Yeah, me too.
I go back with you guys from the inception of the first record before it actually even came out.
Really?
Yeah. My buddy Phil DiBenedetto owned a record store in Brooklyn in the 80s and 90s. And a promo of the record had come in before it was released. And I remember the two of us, we were just talking about this the other day, and he looked at the cover and we turned it around, looked at the band, and we both said, this has to be good. So it's a 35-year-old relationship with the band, and glad to have you aboard. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
No problem. My pleasure.
So I wanted to ask, there's so many things that I know about the band and so many things that I'm unclear about. I know the inception was you and Dana. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah.
It was originally called Piercing Arrow and then Beowulf.
That was the name of our first high school band Dana and I had. It was called Pierced Arrow. And, we had a few other guys from high school in and out of that band, but Dana and I always seemed to remain. We were kind of the same two guys that always just wanted to jam together, but we had a few guys in and out. And after a couple of years of doing that, the band changed the name to Beowulf. And shortly after that, we met John Drenning up there at a rehearsal facility where we used to all rehearse next to a few other bands in the same complex. And we heard John playing through the door of a closed room one day. He was on the other side of that door ripping the guitar, and we hadn't seen him yet. We just heard him, and we go, who's that in there? We got to see who this is. Knocked on the door, and we go, hey, the guitar player in our band currently, isn't really probably going to be with us. We're not really liking him that much, but why don't you come over and play with us? So Dana and I invited John in. And at the time, Dana and I were 18 about that time, and we had been playing together since we were 15.
Okay.
And, we both started playing together. We lived in the same neighborhood and started playing together. We were about 15 years old, just learning Ted Nugent songs and Alice Cooper songs and, learning our chops. By the time we invited John in our band, we were 18 and he was 16, and Dana and I were, had gotten quite good by that time, and our band was pretty tight. And John was a young guy, and he had incredible guitar chops, but hadn't really played in a tight, unit of a band yet. And he was looking to get in a band, so he was excited. We asked him in. After John came in, Jeff came next. He was another guy we knew through the high school crowd. And when John first joined Dana and I, we had a different bass player. But after a few months, we invited Jeff in. That made up the core of the musical lineup of the band anyway. And the original singer that we had at that point too didn't really work out, and it came to the four of us kind of going, hey, we need a singer. Who can we get? And Dana's sister actually was dating this guy from our school too, and his name was Midnight. And he wasn't really so much of a heavy metal guy or a rocker, but he was more kind of a folky performer that would play some of the school weekend pool parties and stuff. He'd always be out playing his acoustic and singing Going to California by Zeppelin, stuff like that. And he was really good at the Pink Floyd stuff. And we thought, man, this guy's got an amazing voice. Maybe we should see if he can sing in our band, or if he even wants to. And so we brought him out and auditioned him, and he was just turned out to be a shining diamond there. You know, he started singing all the songs that we were doing by the Scorpions or whoever, Def Leppard and Crocus and all the stuff we used to cover when we were teenagers. And we're like, can you try this, Midnight? Can you try this? And he was singing them all very well. We're like, okay, we have something here.
So he wasn't into that type of music at all?
You know, he got into it as we sort of introduced him to it, because John and I really liked, you know, Priest and Def Leppard and Accept and Scorpions, and Dana did too. And we were covering a lot of that stuff, and Ozzy songs and some Black Sabbath songs, you know, from the Dio era. We were just playing all kinds of things that we liked. But Midnight really wasn't that kind of singer, but he quickly, you know, grabbed right onto it.
Yeah, definitely.
And, shortly after that, anyway, we sort of abandoned the whole idea to do cover songs. I mean, shortly after we got Midnight in, we all kind of said, hey, you know, if we're going to get anywhere, we don't want to be just playing covers in the local bars. Let's do all originals. Let's take this to the proper level. And we just, you know, all of a sudden one day just said, we're never going to play a cover song again. That's it. We're just going to work on our originals. And that's what we did.
What year was that?
Probably around 83 or so.
Okay.
84. Yeah.
And what was the writing process? Because that first album to me was really very different writing-wise than the bands of that era. It's one of the things that I really grabbed onto, is that the songs were so mature and different than everything else at the time.
Thank you very much. You know, I think we were influenced a lot by Iron Maiden, and you know, we used to cover a lot of the songs from the second and third album, from Killers and Number of the Beast, and we would do some Judas Priest songs. We used to do like Solar Angels, and we like stuff like that. And the first Dio album was a gem, and at that time that we were writing the first Crimson album, we were all huge fans of that Holy Diver album. And I think some of our influences that were coming from these Priest albums and Iron Maiden albums and Dio albums were sort of coming through in our music a little bit. But of course we had, you know, our originality going into it too. But I listened back to the first album, and I sort of remember, I think we got a little influence there from Maiden, or a little influence there from Dio or something.
Who wrote the song Azrael? That's always like a song that to this day, anytime I put it on, I just lose my mind.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Midnight and John started coming up with the basic theme and the root parts of the song, and we all got together in the room and you know, arranged it and tried it several different ways until we liked it as a band. And I think Jeff was in on some of the riffs in it too. I think those are the three guys credited for writing the song, John and Jeff and Midnight. You know, we get together almost, back when we were young, we get together like 3-4 nights a week and just jam hours on end. And all these songs that we would try in many different ways and try this arrangement and that arrangement until we really thought it was clicking. And my feeling, I think we were all kind of putting this music together as a band a lot, even though sometimes, you know, certain riffs might be coming from John and Jeff, and they were sort of the dominant writing guys in that early period. They were writing a lot of the music, and Midnight was writing the majority of the lyrics and everything.
Where did
Dana and I always wanted to contribute to the writing too, and we did where we could. You know, or sometimes I think on the first album I had a credit on one song. On the second album I had a writing credit on one song. It was really a combination of everybody and the chemistry of it all, though.
Where did the idea of the masks come from?
One day we were getting ready to do a photo shoot, and Warren Wyatt, the manager, and John Drenning were en route to my apartment to pick me up, and they hit some costume shop on the way down, or stopped to buy something, get batteries or something, and they saw this mask, and they came over and walked in with it, and I said, hey, we got this idea. And it was kind of funny. I was just hanging around the apartment with my girlfriend at the time. She was a pretty girl, and they were like, we want to maybe do something with this mask in the band, but let's do a test photo shoot too. Let's get her to wear the mask. And Warren, the manager, had my girlfriend modeling the mask and wearing like a leather jacket and all this stuff. And we did like a whole photo shoot with her for the first like day. And then we're like, well, hey, let's try one next week. And we're going to get 4 more of these, and we're going to do a whole band shoot. At first it was just kind of like a sudden out of nowhere idea. And then it just grew into something that we decided we would do, to give some theatrics to the band's image.
Wow. So it's as simple as that, just something that a spur of the moment thing.
Yeah. They were on their way to my house and stopped at some store on the way, and they saw this mask and they're like, hey, grab that. They came over to my place, and you could tell they were kind of like dreaming up the ideas. They were walking up the driveway. They came in with, hey, we think we got an idea. I'm like, oh yeah? Okay. So,
it definitely added to again, from somebody that came into the band from the ground floor, it definitely added a mystique to the band. As
yeah.
Maybe 35 years down the road, as we are now, we look at it and say, what was that all about? But at that time, it definitely, I know myself as a fan, a guy that hung out in a record store that was massively popular back in the mid 80s. It definitely grabbed people's attention in a good way.
Well, good. That's what we were hoping for. I think we might have got a few chuckles from people like, what, are they serious? But for the most part, I think people took it seriously and thought it was a cool idea.
It was. At least I thought so.
Thank you, man.
Now, what was the story about that I've always heard is that, after you guys had the full face masks on and you did touring and everything like that, you realized that, hey, they were a little bit hot to wear, and you kind of modified them a little bit for the following album, right?
Exactly, yeah. We were sweating under those things terribly, especially Dana being the drummer. He was back there sweating so bad, and snot would be running out of his mask and dripping down. We got to do something about this. So, yeah, we decided to cut them probably for that reason, because they were uncomfortable and weird to wear these whole full face masks on tour.
Yeah.
But when we did cut them, it turned out to be a cool thing, because everybody then decided, okay, we're each going to take a full face mask and draw out a slightly different cutting pattern, and we'll take razor blade and cut it, and each guy will have like a slightly different one. So we did. I mean, if you really look at them on Transcendence, you can see each guy's is a little different.
Yeah, it kind of gave you a little bit of a uniqueness to each member.
Yeah, where on the first album, they were all just pretty much the same mask.
So what I wanted to ask you is something that's, again, has been on my mind for literally decades. The label Roadrunner, how did you find that label? How did that label treat the band, in your opinion?
Well, we were working on the first album at Morrisound in Tampa, Morrisound Recording. And this is also the studio where Sabotage did their first album or two, Sirens and Dungeons, I think. And through hanging out at Morrisound, we met this guy named Dan Johnson from Par Records here in Florida. And Dan had a relationship with Case Wessels and Roadrunner over there in the Netherlands. So we first signed with Dan Johnson here in Florida to his local label called Par Records. And it was just from there he got it, the deal for us for it to be released in Europe on Roadrunner. And they treated us pretty good. The first couple times we went over there to tour in the Netherlands, I remember one time Mr. Wessels met us and took us all out to dinner at some cool place, and we all hung out. It was an exciting time for us. We were over in Europe as 20-year-olds. We got this new album out that everyone's really lit up about. It was a pretty cool time.
Now, you talked about, you mentioned Sabotage a minute ago. Is that a band that you had any type of relationship with as far as, the members and everything?
A little bit. I mean, we met them here and there in and out of Morrisound studio because they were recording stuff at Morrisound, and we were too at that time. And, Jim Morris was engineering and producing them and was also engineering and producing us. So we'd meet them, and but I used to even go see them play concerts back when they were called Avatar, and they were playing, out in front of shopping malls on flatbeds and stuff. So,
oh wow,
I wouldn't say we really knew them really well at first, but we knew who each other were. I mean, they lived, I think, in the Clearwater area, which is about an hour north of where we were all living in Sarasota. And sometimes, we drive up there to see them. And, we definitely knew who they were. Their album Sirens came out, maybe a year or so before our first album. So when we heard,
I think that record came out.
Yeah. So we had seen them a couple times locally live even before hearing their record. So we kind of knew these guys are heavy duty. They're pretty cool. And then their record came out, Sirens, and we got our hands on it. I remember Dana picked up a copy, and I used to roommate with Dana, and we were listening to it a lot. And then sometimes when we'd go up at Morrisound and be recording, we'd bump into them in and out. One time we were even at Dan Johnson's house, the owner of Par Records, and Chris and his wife, Chris Olive and his wife, came by Dan's house and was just hanging out there while we were also hanging out there. So we met a few times here and there. Actually, now, later in years, I've met John Oliva many times, so I'd call him a friend. Not that we're real close, but I know him whenever I see him around. No, it's always a pleasure to see him. He's a madman.
Well, it's interesting because
Talent.
Florida had two. In retrospect, I look back at the 80s, and there were about maybe 10 or 11 bands out of the States that were real game changers in terms of coming up with material that was markedly different than anything that was ever done before. I mean, a large amount of bands in the 80s were replicas of the 70s, which I was a child of the 70s, so I knew that.
Me too.
Right. So there were only about, and this is an exhaustive search in my mind, about 10 or 11 bands, in my opinion, in that era that were unique. And two of them came out of Florida, which was your band and Sabotage. And me and Mark were actually talking about this before we went on the air because we're both big Sabotage fans. And he had said to me, I wonder if there's there's any crossover between the two bands out of Florida.
Well, one thing, is John Zahner is the keyboard player who played on our first, on Transcendence and toured with us extensively a lot. And he also played keyboards with John Oliva's Pain. And played with Sabotage on, he was kind of in and out of their lineup a couple times. I think there might be a couple of their videos where you see him. So we had that in common, the same keyboard player. And we had the Morrisound connection. And actually, Chris Oliva and I are the same age. We were both born in 63, maybe a couple months apart. So if he was still alive today, he'd be my age, 58. We met them a few times and there was a little connection. I definitely respected them and thought they were really cool. I thought they were the coolest all original metal band from our area at that time. I'm like,
yeah, they were. They really were original.
They just had something, man. They had that something. Then there was a couple other bands in our area, one, like Rock's Gang and Stranger, and they were kind of, doing cool things too, but not quite like Sabotage. Sabotage had something a little more special.
Yeah, we're both big Stranger fans too, so I'm very in tune with them. But
me too. I love Stranger back in the day. They were a lot of fun to go see. Totally.
They
Did you guys live around here back in the day, or?
No, we're Mark is from Jersey. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I live in Jersey now. How'd
you end up finding out about Stranger?
Because that's what I've done my whole life. Find every obscure band on the face of the earth.
I didn't know if they were just a Florida phenomenon.
Oh, they are. They are. But that's just. But they did.
Everybody in Florida loved them.
They were huge in Florida, but they did have. There was one album that they put out that did get like a big distribution out of all their stuff. But
I think on Epic. Yeah.
Epic, exactly right.
Yeah.
But they were a terrific band. But I kind of want to move on to the second record now, which was a huge bump up in production, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
If you could tell us a little bit about that.
When we did the first album at Morrisound, Dan Johnson from Par Records was the producer, and Jim Morris was more like the engineer. When we went and did the second album, Transcendence, Jim Morris was acting as engineer and producer. We weren't really having Dan on board as producer. And the budget was considerably larger. I think the first album we had a budget of maybe around 30,000, and the Transcendence album budget was around 50. And, and we had grown a bit in the talent register. We had, the songwriting was getting a little slicker and a little better, and our studio experience and how to go in and track and do things and bring it all together was kind of getting a little better. So these just may be the things that explain the slightly higher level there,
And what was the extent
we
of
were
the
pretty
touring?
young. We're pretty young and green when we put out the first album. By the time the second one came out, we got a little experience under our belt.
What was the extent of the touring on the second record? Because it's a question I wanted to ask you, because I don't recall you guys. Did you do East Coast dates?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, when the Transcendence album came out, and I think it was November, it was just about November 1st. Yeah, 88. I can't really remember what we did right around that fall of 88, but I know we probably did some dates then, right when it came out. But when April or so came in 89, we went over to Europe and did a bunch of big festivals like the Metal Hammer Festival, the Aardschok Festival, where we were opening for Ozzy, Queensrcyhe, and many others. But while we were over there doing those festivals, we were also put on the Doro tour, and we were her opening band for like several weeks all over Europe. And that was a fun tour because Doro is basically Warlock, and
Right.
Although she wasn't calling it Warlock anymore. And, we were on a tour as her support act and played with her for probably a good few weeks all over many of the European countries. So that was a good experience for us. And that was in, I think, like I said, springtime of 89. And then in the fall of 89, we went out in October, I think it began, and we did a complete North American tour for Transcendence. I don't think we played every state, but we did a lot of them. And, we played New Jersey, we played New York, we played, a lot of those northern states up there.
Did you guys
We
hit
played L'Amour's in
Lemoore?
Brooklyn.
Okay.
When we played L'Amour's in Brooklyn, we opened up for EZO, the Japanese band, on that gig. When we played over at Club Narcissus in Boston,
Right.
we opened up for Lizzie Borden that night. And then when we played the Living Room in Rhode Island, we opened up for Lizzie Borden. So those were a few northeastern dates where we opened up for other bands, but pretty much the whole Transcendence North American tour was us headlining, metal clubs and some smaller theaters where we would have, other bands opening for us.
Right.
You guys and Lizzie Borden, it must have been an interesting show because there
Yeah.
were a lot of similarities.
Yeah, that was a fun couple of shows. We did two of them right in Rhode Island and then Boston.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think a friend of mine actually said something that he compared kind of Midnight's vocals as having a little bit of that Lizzie Borden style in there.
Yeah, I can see that. And then when we did the Transcendence tour, we went up and did a gig in Toronto, Canada. And when we made our way over to LA and the other side of the country, we were doing Seattle and down through LA, and then we went down into Mexico and did a show in Tijuana. So it was pretty big tour. And then when that tour ended in mid-December, right near the end of the year, the last couple weeks in December, we went over to Japan, did a couple weeks over there.
I would imagine you went over really big over there, right?
Yeah, quite well.
Yeah, I could imagine.
The whole 1989 year was a pretty, probably the busiest year we ever had as far as out, traveling places and touring, and definitely firing on all cylinders and just out there pushing hard. It was a fun year.
So that takes us to album number 3, which, as a diehard fan, I was not happy with when it came out. At 30 years after the fact, I warmed up to it somewhat. I know you and Dana left the band at that point. Could you give us a little bit of what was going on at that point?
This always comes up, so I'm just going to say it as it is. Near the end of that Transcendence tour of 89, when we were doing the last couple months of the year, I just think there was a plan brewing in John's mind where he wanted to be the only guitar player for the next album. And they were even looking at the drum tech that was Dana's drum tech on the tour as being the new drummer. And I'm not really sure why they wanted to make that change, because the band was really firing on all cylinders. Like I said, we were getting so good live. We were a well-oiled machine. The only one who was having any trouble at all on the Transcendence tour was Midnight, because he was starting to get into a little bit of a drinking habit, and he'd have some great shows and he'd have some that weren't so great. But the band was really doing great. But right about as soon as that tour ended in '89, we finished the last gig in Texas on New Year's Eve, '89, and then we got home from a long year of touring. And it was only like 2 weeks into the month of January 1990 that I called Jeff and was saying, "Hey, let's get together. Let's start working on new songs for the next album." And he was kind of, mumbling something about how I wasn't really needed. And I'm just like, huh? What? I was totally blindsided. I'm like, really? I mean, I kind of formed this band and invited all you guys in.
Right.
So he was just, kind of letting me know and that they were going to go ahead and do it, and Jeff and him were going to write everything alone, and John was just going to be the only guitar player. And I was a little bit taken back, and it seemed like they only not only wanted to let me go, but they wanted to let Dana go and replace him. Maybe they thought because we were such good friends and we started the whole thing that, hey, we can't fire one without the other. And I don't know what Yeah, I don't know, but I really get the feeling, and I'm only being honest. I'm not trying to say anything terribly negative, but I get the feeling that it was just kind of something brewing in John's head, that he wanted to make this kind of a change. I think after the couple years of the band climbing in success from the release of the first one, then the second one, I think some of it all was starting to go to his head a little bit. He was, he's got kind of an ego. He's always had a big ego, and I think it was getting a little blown up, and he was thinking, man, this is, I'm the man, I'm the star of the show, and I'm going to change it any way I want, and people will love it no matter what change I make. And I just think it was a bad move on their part.
It was a bit, I always looked at it. I didn't know whether it was a panic move because of the beginning of the shifting of the scene. But
dude, I think no, they kind of decided to do that before the scene even really shifted. Because,
wow, I never knew that.
It was like they made that decision right in the last month of like '89. And then the first month of '90, they kind of told me, and I'm just like, wow, crazy. So, Dana and I right away started gathering people and trying to put together another project, and then they took a year, 1990, and wrote and recorded the Strange and Beautiful album, and it came out in '91. And, people even interview me and say, hey, I heard that the reason you left is because you heard some of that material they were working on for the third album. You didn't really dig the style of it, so you decided to left. I'm like, no, I never heard anything of that album until it actually came out, was in the stores.
Wow.
And, I didn't know what they were working on. All I know is they just didn't want to work on anything with me anymore. And I'm like, okay. So I got the album and listened to it. And, I find some things about it that are very appealing. And cause I'm a music fan with a wide variety of tastes, and I liked it. So, but it was a huge departure from the band style that we had started and the path we were already sort of on. So it caught the fans way off guard, and I can see why it wasn't really a big success.
Did I could tell you
took people off guard. I'm not saying it's a bad record. I would never say that.
It's not. But what it did to fans was just let the air out of the balloon, because
the difference, just not having Dana and I on board, dropping the mask idea. Right. Turning the band into a twin guitar attack, kind of a prog metal band, into sort of a Zeppelin-y, kind of a Cinderella type band with, sax solos and female backup singers. It was such a huge departure. And the fans didn't know what to think of it. And honestly, the weird thing is right after the record came out, they booked a little 2-week or so tour in America here, some dates they were going to do in some clubs to support that new record. And the very first date they did in Tampa, I guess Midnight didn't have an extremely good show that night, and they fired him the next day just for having one bad show. And then it was really starting to be, okay, obviously this is turning into a pattern here. John's kind of taking this band over. He thinks he can change it to anything he wants to, fire anybody he wants to, and it's still going to fly. And it really wasn't. And Atlantic Records dropped the band probably 6 months after that record came out.
That record was a flop because at that point,
and they fired Midnight after the first show supporting the new record, and that was crazy. I mean, whatever problem he had, they should have tried to address it.
In 91, I was writing for 3 different magazines over in the UK, and the feedback on that record was awful. And not only from me, not only from the States, that was across the globe. And it was really because the second record was a step up from the first record. And the first record everybody loved. The second record everybody adored. And the anticipation was already there for the third record. So when 2 core guys were out, total change in not only style, but like appearance. And they just kind of came off like every other band. And you guys, what set you apart is you weren't every other band.
I know. It almost seemed like they were looking at everybody else that was really doing well in the MTV, realm. And they're just like, oh, let's try to be the next like Cinderella or White Lion or something. That's
absolutely.
I don't know, man. We sort of worked it out later. John wanted me to rejoin in 1998. He called me and said, we're working on a 4th album and we want you to rejoin. We want it to be a twin guitar attack again because we can't even play the stuff from the first 2 albums with 1 guitar player anyway. I'm like, no, I know. So, at the time when Dana and I left the band, I remember, they were just kind of telling people just to save face, like, oh, they didn't, it was sort of a difference in opinion and musical direction, so they decided to quit. And back then, I didn't even dispute that. People would ask me that, and I just went, yeah, I guess that's it, because I didn't really want to tell people I was let go. It kind of felt bad. Yeah. But years later, it goes by, and people ask me, and I just tell it like it is.
No, and that the honesty is appreciated because as a 35-year long fan, I didn't even know that. I always assumed.
Yeah, I just feel like that we were sort of edged out.
No, that was definitely the story I always heard too. Like when you listen to any interviews or you read anything, it was always, oh, you didn't really like the direction the band was going in, so we left. But
yeah, they just wanted it to sound good, so they didn't look like bad guys, I guess. I don't know.
So if we could talk a little bit about the 4th record, which I'm personally a huge fan of.
Oh, thank you.
What I didn't know was that Midnight was actually supposed to sing that record.
Yeah.
If you could take us down that road.
John and Jeff, I think they started talking again about maybe bringing the band back, and they were 97 or so. And before they even talked to me, John and Jeff, they went and told Midnight that we're thinking about making another album, trying to get this band back up and running, and they wanted to do it with him. And he said yes, he was game. And I guess the story John gave me and Jeff, they said they went to his house a couple times to try to pick him up or try to meet with him to get together and either talk about it or begin some writing. And they said every time they went to get him, he was either passed out drunk or just wasn't ready or something. And they just kind of looked at it. The two of them looked at each other and said, man, this just isn't going to work. He's not up to it, because bless his heart, we all love Midnight, but after the Transcendence album and the 90s hit, his kind of drinking just sort of started spiraling and just kind of turned into something that plagued him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I know. He gave, there's some really weird interviews out there.
Yes, and he still had so much immense talent to sing and write and everything, but he just wasn't grounded. He didn't really have his feet planted firmly on the ground. He was just too kind of, they could tell when they met with him, this is just going to be a crazy time if we try to do another record with him. So unfortunately, they decided not to do it with Midnight, and they met Wade. I think they saw him singing out at some club with his band Lucian Black, or John saw him and thought was very exciting, could be a good singer for the band. By the time they actually got a hold of me, they already had Wade in the band and already had that album completely recorded.
And how did you get Dr. Kildrums in the mix of all this?
I'll tell you, and it's just they were asking me to rejoin because they said, we're putting out an album that's sort of similar to the old style with twin guitar attack and heavy again, prog metal, although it sounds different with Wade. But they told me we're going back to the old style and we want you to come back. And I think they even said because the label we're on over in Germany, Rising Force or Rising Sun Records, wants there to be as many original guys in it as possible to make it look good when the band returns. So, so they asked me to come back, and then they had Wade in place, and I met him, and I went out to John's place on Anna Maria Island where they were mixing and working on the final touches of the record. And they're like, "What do you think of this, Ben?" I'm like, "I really like it. It's really good." But to be honest with you, everything was already done, and everything on that record is a drum machine. It was all programmed at John's, house, and the only people that appear on that record are John did all the guitars, Jeff did the bass, the drums are a drum machine, Wade sang, and there was a couple other backing singers like David Van Landing and Paul Beach, I think, did some backing vocals. But that's the makeup of the band for that album. Steve Wackles wasn't on the record, and I wasn't on it either.
So why was he pictured on it? I think because
well, right after they finished the record, and we're getting ready to release it, and actually we're getting ready to make photo shoots and plan tours for the record. We found out Steve might be available to play with us and do the tour, the Astronomica tour.
Okay.
Said he was interested in it. And we knew Steve from back in the day, and I was excited about that. So we talked to Steve, and he said he wanted to join the band and go do the tour for the album, the Europe tour. And so he came down to Sarasota and did a bunch of photo shoots with us. And those photo shoots, one of them ended up on the back cover, and we just listed him as a player on the record. And he was going to do the tour. We got together up in St. Pete maybe once or twice. I don't even think John made it to those rehearsals. I think it was just me and Jeff and Wade went up and rehearsed with Steve Wackles a couple times. And it sort of seemed like he had a lot going on, and the tour was coming up pretty quick. And I didn't even know if he was really going to be ready to get all the stuff ready because he didn't know the songs that well.
Right.
And it was then decided that we would use another guy we knew from Sarasota named Jesse Rojas, and he was the drummer that went on tour with us.
Okay.
So, and we, there was no hard feelings with Steve or anything. It just turned out that he didn't actually play on the record. He was just pictured on it, and he didn't actually do the tour with us either. Another guy ended up doing the tour.
Because his presence did bring a lot of attention to that release.
Of course, yeah. I think just having his name and face on it sure didn't hurt anything.
Yes. No, it did. It helped you quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, and the label knew that, and John, we all knew that. We wanted him to do the tour, man. We were excited that we were going to have Steve playing with us on tour. And
sure.
For one reason or another, and I can't even nail it down exactly, it just didn't come together. I think, from what I remember, it just seemed like he was very busy and wasn't able to put in enough rehearsals to really make it get together in time for the tour. I don't know. We had a couple rehearsals with him.
What was your feeling on that album? Were you happy with it, with the material?
Yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty cool. All the songs are pretty heavy. It kind of lacks some of the more passionate moments, obviously, that the first two albums have, because there's a cool song, Edge of Forever and Sidonia. Those are a couple of the more, more of those kind of songs, like the more passionate, not as super heavy duty songs. But on the first albums, we had songs like Painted Skies and Burning Bridges, and they were very kind of like passion filled, give you goosebumps to listen to them.
Oh, absolutely. Very operatic.
And Astro didn't quite have anything that represented that. But some of the really heavy songs were done really well. They were really fun to play live, and it was really cool music. I think it was a little bit heavier than the first two albums, actually.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And
Wade sounded, bass. Wade came across a little bit more like a Rob Halford on that album.
You know who he always reminded me of in physical appearance and vocal? He reminded me a lot of Red Forrester.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, and that's...
Wade's job on the record was really great, too, and he was a blast on tour and did very well on the tour.
No, he's a pro.
He is a pro, and I'm still very good friends with Wade to this day. We're super good friends. But on that tour, or on that album, I like the album a lot. It lacks some of that very passionate, emotional content that the earlier albums did.
Yeah, the heaviness of it was really good. Jeff Ward's bass sound was, I don't know how he got that bass sound. I never quite.
It was really fat and really,
never
really
heard
present.
anything quite like that.
For a band with twin guitars
Right.
and a lot of stacked guitars and two guitar parts always going on, the bass just really slammed right through.
Yeah, it was like Jaco Pastorius with like 100 Marshall stacks behind him. It was
I know.
incredible bass sound.
John actually recorded that album in his basement at his house on Anna Maria Island on some pretty primitive gear. And,
Really?
So that album didn't have quite the pristine production of a Morrisound production, but it still did sound pretty darn good, and the bass sounded really good.
The bass was otherworldly. It really was.
Yeah.
He had an incredible sound on that album. So what I wanted to move on from there was how you guys got hooked up with Todd La Torre.
Okay, well, let me think. After the Astronomica tour in 2000, we sort of like stepped away from each other again for like a good 6 years. I don't know why we always tend to do that. It was around 2006. We had Wade come back, and we went and did a couple shows with Wade, or maybe it was, I don't know. I'm getting behind. 2006, we were invited to go over to Greece and do a show with Midnight, the all original members again. It was called the Rockwave Festival. So we went and did that 2006 with Mid, and that was our last show with Mid, because again, it was kind of apparent that he just wasn't really physically able to pull this
That's
stuff
a really
off.
odd show. The whole show is up on YouTube if you.
Yeah. So we sort of rebanded around that time, around the cause of going over to do the Rockwave Festival with the original band, because they were really excited and wanted us to do it. So we sort of reformed with that goal in mind. And then after it didn't go so well, we were all like, well, we're back together. We'll rehearse, let's get Wade back. So we got Wade back. Around 2008, we did a few shows with Wade again. I think we teamed up with Vicious Rumors in Florida, did a couple gigs. And we were having a little fun, just kind of playing live again with Wade. And then, that was around the time then Midnight passed away. And, we had decided then that we were going to do a big tribute concert for Midnight in Atlanta at the Prog Power Festival. And I think it was 2009 that we did that. And we were going to do a big long set and have all the other singers from all the other bands on the whole weekend bill all come up and sing various Crimson songs. So although Wade was still our acting vocalist, we were doing, maybe 20 songs, and on every song we had a different singer on it. Or two singers, because I don't know if you guys heard anything about that show, but it was the Prog Power Festival in 2009, and we did a huge show to tribute Midnight.
Oh, it's actually on YouTube also.
Yeah.
Okay,
now that you mention it, I remember.
around that time, then our good friend Matt Laporte, who was the guitar player for John Oliva's Pain and Circle to Circle, and Matt Laporte was a really huge fan of Crimson Glory and loved Midnight. And so when we did the Prog Power show, Matt said, I want to come and I want to be the third guitar player for Crimson Glory tonight because I loved Midnight so much. And we had him do it. So Matt actually sat in a chair kind of in the back, and behind us. And he was doing like third guitar parts for us while John and I were doing the main stuff. But Matt, while he was coming to rehearsal to play guitar with us to prepare for the Prog Power show, one day he brought Todd La Torre down to rehearsal with him. He had this little guy with him. He's like, hey guys, I'm bringing somebody down tonight. He's my secret weapon. We're like, oh, okay. Whatever friend of yours is welcome. Bring him down. So he brought Todd down to our rehearsal where we were having a normal band rehearsal with Wade. And Matt Laporte goes, you guys got to let this guy sing a couple songs. He's going to blow you away. We're like, okay. So Todd sang a couple songs and we're like, wow, he's amazing. He's really good. So we invited Todd to be one of the singers to sing at the Prog Power tribute. And he was the only singer there that night that wasn't a singer in another band. I mean, Wade was our singer. Every other singer singing with us that night were singers from all the other bands that were playing Prog Power, and some of these were pretty well-known metal bands. We had prog rock and all kinds of people singing. Todd was the only guy that we invited to sing that night who was actually a complete unknown, never sang with anybody.
He was just a drummer at that point, right?
He was a drummer, yeah, and that's what he had been for several years, but he had some singing abilities, some great ones. we met him through Matt Laporte and decided to have him be one of the singers that night. And he came up to Atlanta with us and he sang and he was great. And somehow over the next couple months after that gig, we in the band all just kind of knew that Todd was going to be our next singer, you know? And, so we almost hated to let Wade down at that point because we were sort of getting reactivated with him. But I don't know. I think it was 2010 that we made that decision that Todd was going to be the singer. And we invited him to join the band. And he came down and we started rehearsing. And it was very apparent that Todd could sing all of the Midnight catalog. You know, he could sing Burning Bridges and Painted Skies and Lonely and do those and make them sound, you know, very passionate, where Wade couldn't really do some of those songs. You know, he was great at many of the heavier songs like Red Sharks and Eternal World and Mask of the Red Death and all the Dragon Lady, but some of the songs like Burning Bridges and Painted Skies, I don't think we ever did those live when we toured with Wade. We just kind of realized they weren't really his cup of tea. But when we brought Todd in, he could sing all that stuff. And so it was a little exciting. So, you know, we booked some tours in Europe for 2011 and 12 to go showcase our new singer, and everybody was just in love with him.
Now, you guys brought the masks back at that point?
No, not really. I mean, all we did was, I think we did an encore each night where we would do Lost Reflection, and Todd would wear a mask.
Oh, because I did see something on YouTube with Todd wearing a mask.
I think, but when we did Lost Reflection, it's the kind of song where you don't even really see the band on stage. You only really see Todd. Like, I think I stand off to the side wings and I'm playing the clean guitar part, and our keyboard player's over on the other Dyke side of the stage playing little keyboards.
Oh, okay.
But other than me and the keyboard player, nobody's really playing. The drummer and the other guys are sort of back out of that situation. And Todd would sing Lost Reflection, but he'd be out on the stage with a spotlight on him, and it would just be like him.
Oh, okay.
And then there's a short piece in the end of Lost Reflection where the whole band pops in and does a little heavy thing that's only a few seconds long. So that's the extent of the mask wearing. It was just Todd wearing it for Lost Reflection.
Oh, all right.
So I felt when you had him, that could have been like another chapter of the band. I really was very optimistic of the future. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. I think we were all feeling that way, you know, after we went and did probably 3 or 4 visits to Europe in 11 and 12. We all wanted to do a record with Todd, and we started to write a couple new songs with him. And after maybe the 4th trip over there, I think we decided like it's time for us to stop going over there and doing these little 2-week Europe trips. You know, we're not going to be as a nostalgia act together. If we're going to do anything, keep this going, let's make a new record. And I think I was even the one that said, hey, we get together on this night every week anyway when we're preparing for a tour, and everybody shows up every week. Let's get together this night every week and let's start writing. And they're all like, yeah, okay. And they go, everybody can write stuff at home too and bring ideas in to show each other, but let's just set one night a week and let's get together and write. And everybody was like, heck yeah, let's do it. We're all motivated. And we came in, started doing it, and after only like a few weeks, John just kind of started coming late or not coming at all, and Todd was getting discouraged. You know, Dana and Jeff and I would be there every time, and Todd and John's involvement was sort of starting to pull away. At the same time, Todd was getting offers to join Queensrcyhe, and at first when he joined them, they didn't even know if they were going to call it Queensrcyhe. They had talked about calling it Rising Force.
Right.
And something like that.
Yeah.
And Todd was still fully in Crimson Glory at that time when he started playing with them and doing the first Rising Force gigs. And then when the decision was made, he was actually going to be the singer of Queensrcyhe. They were going to continue with the name Queensrcyhe. He came and told us, you know, hey guys, you know, this opportunity is presenting itself. I really have to do it. And he was still saying like, I'm going to do both bands. You know, I'm going to do your new album and I'm going to be with them too. I'm going to do both bands. And we were at first just kind of going, you know, okay, buddy, because we love Todd. You know, he'd become a really good friend to us. And we didn't want to say, oh, fuck that. We're like, okay, Todd, let's see how it goes. But I think we kind of knew inside that he wasn't going to be able to do both bands.
Right.
You know, once they got going, they were going to tell him, hey, man, you got to just do us, you know?
Yeah, sure.
maybe the first month he was hanging around with them, they said, "Sure, you can be in both bands," but we knew they weren't going to let that happen.
Right.
No.
And not once they really got going. So, but it was also kind of two things. He was getting lured into their camp, and we knew that was where he needed to go because it was a better opportunity for him. And also, John just stopped coming, and Todd sort of just told us he was quitting because of that reason. He didn't even say it was because I'm doing Queensrcyhe, I won't have time for you. He said, I'm quitting because John isn't showing up to the writing sessions, and it doesn't look like this is going anywhere. And I've seen in a few Todd La Torre interviews where they've asked him about why he left Crimson. He singles John out and says, John, stop coming.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
He doesn't say anything about the rest of us. He just says,
he doesn't. He pulls no punches, and whatever it was, it was. It was just interesting to me because I've really viewed him as like a savior for Crimson Glory.
Yeah, he could have been, should have been.
Should have, absolutely, and
we all adored him, and we all still do, but he got a great opportunity, and it was a great path for him to follow.
A decade later, he's resurrected and resuscitated that band entirely. So
yeah.
I
deserve so much praise. Yeah.
I was pulling for your band a little bit more than Queensrcyhe at the time. So for me, I really wanted to see it work out. He did resuscitate Queensrcyhe.
Well, some people are passionate Crimson fans. It's kind of funny you say you're pulling for us more than them, because Todd, after he joined Queensrcyhe, he met a girl over in Greece and he married her. That's his new love, his wife. And he told me when he first met her, she was a super huge Crimson Glory fan, but not as much Queensrcyhe. Now she's probably a huge Queensrcyhe fan too.
Right? Yeah, I love them too. It was just,
I think the Greeks love Crimson Glory. Every time we've ever been to Greece, they just really make us feel loved.
The Greeks do, and we're hoping with this podcast, and now that we're on Apple and Spotify, that it goes worldwide, because the Greeks, Germans, you still have a big following of German fans. I know a bunch of my friends in the UK are still very into you guys. So even to this day, if, between you, Jeff, John, if you ever got something back together again with the proper singer, I think you would garner a lot of interest. I really do.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Probably so. I'm not sure what that future may hold. Not too much I could say about that.
Right. No, I get it. It's just there is still an incredible amount of cult-like interest in Crimson Glory to this day, which is that alone is, as a member of the band, has to give you a lot of satisfaction.
Yes, it's nice. It's flattering for sure that people have held on to the love for the band for so long.
It was definitely a different band for that era, which there were just so many bands, and me and Mark.
Yeah, I wish we could have done more. I think we had the potential to go so much farther with it, and I'm thankful for the things we did do and the experiences we had, because they were amazing. But we had potential to go farther, and some of the decision making along the way might have hindered us from achieving that.
Well, I think, especially with the later 80s going into the 90s, that there wasn't a follow-up of records and a commitment with record labels as you saw in the 70s, where you saw great bands that started off that had potential that would end up doing 5, 6, 7, 8 records with the label, and you'd see the progression of that band. And Crimson Glory was one of many bands of that era that just didn't see that proper third record, that proper fourth record.
No, and a couple things play into that too. Like I said, the John and the guys' decision to make so many changes right at that time didn't help, but also the whole change and shift in the industry right in the beginning of the 90s. Sort of, even if we put out a third album that would have been a lot like Transcendence, I don't know. We might have struggled to make the 90s a good decade for us with all the whole grunge movement that old.
Well, the thing with the grunge movement
But I guess
was...
we probably could have stayed tight in Europe.
I think that's what I was going to say. The thing with the grunge movement,
it was more American-based.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. It was something that was a phenomena in the States that really only lasted about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But by 95, a lot of bands were getting signed by the Japanese labels. There was a big outpouring of power metal, symphonic power metal, symphonic music, prog, all getting signed on the German and Japanese labels by like 95, 96. So like,
Dana and I had a band called Parish. We got signed in Japan for that.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. That was I thought was a terrific record.
Thank you much.
Late 80s sounding, but a little more, pushed in the modern direction. Great. The singer you had on that record was terrific. The songwriting was very strong. And that came out about, 95-ish?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, so that kind of bears out my...
And it just came out in Japan and Europe.
Right.
We never had a state deal or anything, states deal.
But that's where I was going with it. Already by then, the music was coming back. It was really a United States phenomena, the grunge, quote unquote.
Yeah. If we would have stuck through it throughout the 90s and just stuck to our guns and put out an album every 2 years and kept trying to progress in the same style and just get better every album, I mean, who knows? We could have been huge, huger.
Huger, yeah, without a doubt. So what's going on with your current band, Avenging Benji? We've just been turned on to them.
Well, we have a new album it's not so new, but we've spent the last couple of years recording, and it's ready to go out. It's called Love Angel, Sex Devil. It's pretty hard rock. It's not so like progressive metal as Crimson, but you hear some of the flavors in there and some of the songs that it's, you could sort of tell that might be coming from me and that little Crimson flavor, but it's more like a hard rock album. There's not a lot of keys or any too much symphonic stuff, but we're real proud of it. It's a pretty cool record, and we're gonna try to get that out right around the new year, January or February. We don't really know exactly which label yet, but I'm talking with a couple friends at a couple labels that might get behind it.
Now, who else is in that band?
The drummer is Key Bland, and he's a 21-year-old guy. He's been playing with us since he was 14. He's an amazing drum prodigy. Excuse me. The other guitar player's name is Borgie, and he's been playing with me for probably 15 years or so. He's been on a couple of my solo albums. He was on the Ben Jackson Group All Over You album that we did in 2005. And he's another album. The first Avenging Benji album we did was called Gold and Dragons, and it was come out in 2010. And Borgie was also on that. So the new album we're getting ready to put out early next year is actually the second album for Avenging Benji. Okay. But this has all just been kind of a progression of me doing various solo things under different monikers.
Now, who's singing with Avenging Benji?
I am. I'm the lead singer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm the. After the Astronomica album came out in '99, I put out one solo album called Ben Jackson. It wasn't called Band or anything, just Ben Jackson. The album was called Here I Come, and I put that out in 2001. And then in 2000,
I have that actually. That's the one that you're on the cover with no shirt on.
Yeah,
right. That's a good record.
That was just kind of me getting back to my roots of a lot of my influences from my growing up in 70s rock and classic rock, and I just did something that was just kind of all me and just didn't think about trying to please anybody else. I wrote some cool songs and put it out, and it was very classic rock influenced.
Right.
So that was 2001, and then in 2003 or so, I added Borgie on guitar and another singer, a girl named Rose Sexton, and the band got a little bigger. So instead of just me putting out another album calling it Ben Jackson, we then called the band, we called it Ben Jackson Group. And we put out an album in 2005 called Ben Jackson Group All Over You. And then a few years after that, I was writing more material for another Ben Jackson Group album with Borgie and stuff. And one day, just kind of on a joke, I just said, I'm thinking about changing the name from Ben Jackson Group to Avenging Benji. and somebody, I think it was my girlfriend at the time or somebody, said, I actually think that's kind of cool. You should. And I go, oh, really? I was just kind of kidding. But a couple of people liked it, and even the guys in the band, like the other guitar player, they're like, yeah, I kind of like it better than Ben Jackson Group. And we're like, okay, so we changed the name to Avenging Benji.
Well, it's a
But
name
these
that
are-
kind of makes you think. It's like, well, what does the band sound like? It's like it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
exactly metal sounding, but
Right. So whether it's Ben Jackson or Ben Jackson Group or Avenging Benji, these are all just been, albums I've made that kind of fall under the solo category of my life and recordings.
right.
Even though I have other members in the band, I feel like, it's in a big way. It's kind of a solo project. A lot of it's coming from me. I'm the lead singer and the main writer.
Right. Well, is there anything? You filled us in on everything. Hopefully we see some new music from you early next year, like you said.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Absolutely. You're welcome. I appreciate you guys wanting to talk to me. It was a pleasure. Good time. Good chat.
I could tell you the pleasure was all ours. So
Yes, thank you.
thanks for making
Awesome,
the time. I
guys.
really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Well, very good. Good night. Yeah,
All right,
good
we'll
time.
keep in touch.
Very good meeting you guys.
Same here.
Keep in
Definitely.
touch. Please do.
Take care.
Thanks, Ben.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.